the things that I sent to Jill to send out sort of deal with that question, I think, in different ways. So I'm going to share a shorter explanation of sort of Whitehead and process philosophy, just so I really love those like philosophy lectures that guy does, because it's like if I got another chance to figure out what college I went to, probably one of those, Wheaton would have been one of them. So it's cool to like watch him do his thing. But I'm gonna play this video real quick, and then we can talk about it a little bit. So just a little quick thing. Alfred North Whitehead was a mathematician, physics person, as well as a philosopher, theologian. So he's kind of an everything person. And his big idea, or the big thing he contributed to thought, whatever, is about like, is this thing called process philosophy. So it's gonna, this is gonna explain it a little bit, and then we can talk about it.
I have been reading of this philosopher named Alfred North Whitehead.
Oh, I realized I don't think I shared sound. One of those things every time.
We heard it.
No, I saw it. You shared it. Maybe it wasn't.
He says that substances do not exist.
But how can anything exist if not substances? What else could exist?
Process. Everything is process. Only events are real.
But surely there must be something which undergoes process. Are there not substances which endure through time?
No. The appearance of enduring substances is merely the result of our limited point of view. Just as fruit rots and iron rusts, so, too, do stars and even galaxies expire. They have no enduring substance.
But what of atoms? Does not matter itself endure? Is not matter itself made up of atoms which endure through time?
No. Atoms are made up of subatomic particles such as protons, neutrons, and electrons. These in turn are made up of quarks, and so on. Matter itself is made of energy.
But is not energy itself a substance?
No. Energy is a relationship between objects. But since objects themselves are made up of matter, which is made up of energy, which is made up of relationships, we are stuck in a strange loop. The universe is a set of relationships, between relationships, between relationships, all of which change over time. None of these relationships is ever static.
I see. So you are saying that substance does not undergo process. Rather, process is primary, and what we call substance is merely a temporary pattern produced by that process.
That is correct.
Wow. This changes everything. Thank you for the explanation.
No problem. Sorry about overturning your scientific paradigm.
No worries. Someday I will have my revenge.
So did that, I know it's really funny, weird. Did that make sense what they were like hinting at?
Okay, hi, this is Kramer Knight, and in today's video we will be going over Alfred North Whitehead's metaphysics.
Sorry, so you know more of that. Did it make sense what they were talking about?
I think you can just talk.
Yeah, it makes sense to me because I do know that time is really the well, first of all, nothing is static. Everything changes, and we do know that matter and it eventually breaks down and turns into energy, and so nothing that you see, it looks solid to us, but it's always in the process of breaking down anyway. But as far as we're concerned, I mean, to our senses, I mean, we know what something exists and we see it, there's certain things that exist that we don't see, and that's something that scientists have been trying to figure out for years and years and years, and they're always coming up with ideas. Like, for instance, this the coronavirus. I mean, you know, they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing now with the vaccine without having an extremely detailed pictures and observations of what a coronavirus does. And as you've seen the pictures, the little circle with the little horns coming out of it. I mean, you know, there was a time when people had no idea what that looked like. Even when I was a kid in the 1950s, they took X-rays. You just see a little, like maybe they could make a little white blotch, and that's all they would be able to see of a virus.
Yeah.
And now you have this extremely detailed picture. It's just astounding. But this is reality around us. We just didn't see it before.
So for you, it's like that kind of like that technological change for you and like capabilities, advancement. That's like how you can see this kind of working out.
Yeah, it's a reality. It's a reality. I mean, I know that I am just have a temporary existence, and eventually I will just disintegrate into energy, and so will my house, and so will my cell phone. I mean, that's just the way reality is. Nothing's permanent.
Word. Anybody else?
Christian, could I replace the word substance in the video with something? Is that what it's trying to say? That the process is what's override? That's this theory, right? The philosophy, the process is what matters, and the things are just what happens, like byproducts of the process. Is that what they were trying to say?
Basically, what we see looks like a thing. But really, if we were to take a bigger view, longer view of time, like we wouldn't see something that's still. We would see something that's constantly changing. That's okay. Constantly. So for our bodies, the things that it's composed of, they're only composed of these things for a moment in time, or for moments in time. And so because we look at it from like, oh, I'm looking at you and you look like you're together, you're formed, right? But that's only because I can see you, you know, for 45 seconds at a time. If I could see you, if I could see the space you were in over 300 years, I wouldn't see just you. I would see everything that formed you, that came into creating you, to like, you know, so that's, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, substance, if you replace it with just, there's another term that people use, concreteness, right? Okay. This, like, all of those things are not really, what this theory is saying is that they don't really exist. Nothing's concrete.
Okay.
I think about this in terms of like social constructs too, of like what we have decided are the rules. It's not because they're actually like real rules. Like we, going back to a topic that we talked about before with like assisted suicide for terminal illnesses, like in a lot of cultures, or in this culture, the majority of the people believe that like we don't have a right to take life, or, you know, like that's, God has that right. And that's like a thing that we've decided as a society is a rule, but that's based on like someone's beliefs, like on a deity, you know, like it is not a real thing. And there are other societies that have thought of that differently, and there are just like hundreds of millions of those types of things. And that coming from a place where I grew up believing one thing and believing like wholeheartedly, like, you know, I would go to other countries and try to convince people to believe like me. Like to believe that that was right and then realize over time how wrong it was, like how toxic it was for me, how toxic it was for others, my specific religion. Like, I feel like I have had a lot of practice in this whole, like, oh, well, that's not real, and that wasn't true, and they only said this because of this, and it's, so when I think about like what's real and what matters, and like if a thing is true, it's right in front of you, it's what we see, it's what we like, we believe that it's real because it's what we've always known. But if we like look behind it, if we look at like the Electoral College, if we look behind it, why it was created, and anyway, everything just breaks apart. And when you, anyway, I started to think a lot about those types of things as that video was playing.
And the quote I love from it is like, the limits of our perception. Like, that's why it looks like this. It's because we are inherently limited in this way. And yeah. And I think this kind of ties to other parts. Like, I think of like the existentialist conversation last week, right? Of like why people may be tempted to try to put things into a kind of like, oh, this is what something is, or to a certain kind of form, or say, kind of establish some kind of meaning behind things that's concrete, is because it's scary to not know, or to feel like our perception is limited. Like, that's scary for a lot of folks. And so it kind of provides comfort to be able to say, actually, this is what it is. I am me, or this person is evil, or this thing is bad, and not sit and kind of like, okay, how has this changed? What does this mean? What does this mean for my life? And then constantly work through that is a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work. And so.
Yeah, but I think of why I joined the Ethical Society and why I continue to believe in the concepts. I'm under no illusion that I have the absolute right answer. I mean, Donald Trump could feel that his way of looking at the world is the right way, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But all I know is that I've learned in my life that particular outlook works for me. I'm not saying it's right for everybody. I mean, if I were in, let's say, in the middle of a battle, fighting for my life, I would probably have a different understanding of what right and wrong is that I have right now. I would never dream of going to my neighbor and let's say going into their house and just taking their TV or something. I wouldn't do it. But maybe under certain circumstances, I might do it.
Yeah.
I know that what works for me here and now is a certain philosophy, and that's why I really appreciate the ethical humanism.
Yeah.
And as long as I can appreciate it, I'm not in a position where, let's say, I'm starving and I have to go steal something, then I'm happy. And if I had to change, I guess I would. Who knows, right?
And I think what I kind of want to bring this to, or sort of ask the question, is like, what happens when this is applied to ideas? What happens when this is applied to our concepts of justice, right, wrong, all these kind of things, right? That if we have a still understanding of it, or we're like invest in the concrete notion of it, what does that limit for our ability to understand of how it changes, or it might become what it might become, or how could it become more, quote unquote, of itself, right? That's the thing I want to kind of explore today. Yeah. So
climate change. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It seems like climate change is probably a good example of that, right? If I only look at today, or the concrete, what's happening in front of me, I'm not seeing big picture or change, then I'm not going to see what I need to do to fix it.
And yes, right. And I think, especially things that happen exponentially, I think this kind of applies to like how this disease spreads, right? Where like people are like, oh, like I can't tell if I'm sick, or I don't like the ways that my actions or our collective actions might affect and ripple out. That becomes, I think that adds to it. And that's like similar to climate change. Like there's like our problems of perception become more, they make addressing these issues harder. They make addressing like, why do our society struggle with this particular disease? Why are society struggling with figuring out a way to address climate change? Right? It's because of there I think is involved is this limit of perception.
You know, when we were living in Northern Virginia for so many years, and we saw it gradually change from a very kind of racist, segregated type place to a very inclusive place. And it used to be a red state, and then it turned to a blue state, especially our area. And we really got used to it. And then we moved to St. Louis and living in St. Charles County. It's like being back in Virginia in the 1970s. What happened to all the inclusion? What happened to all the different races and nationalities and all the people you'd see on the street? All I see is the same old, you know, St. Louis type people that have been here forever. So it's a reality. Boy, it's a strange reality.
Yeah. There's actually the other part of what I wanted to talk about was this person named Roland Barthes, who's a French kind of thinker, and he had this book called Mythology. And what why I like it is because it kind of de-individualizes aspects of how we act and how we engage in society, and then to sort of like, I think in a way made me a little bit more humble about what it means to be a human. And there's this particular chapter. It's actually the first chapter in the book of in his book Mythologies. It's about wrestling, professional wrestling, and that there's a particular response that the crowd is sort of like group oriented to like what all the things that the wrestler does means. And so that like their reaction and their sort of dance, this public dance, where people understand like, oh, this is what this means when this character does that, or this is the evil person because this is what they're doing. And this is, and so it's like, oh, like we as a society, whatever society we're a part of, develops these kind of signs. They develop this way of communication, but also teaching and learning and acting. And it's like us as individuals actually maybe matters less than what we think of and how we come to terms with these signs. So this is another little short, like little animated thing. Their accents are a little, maybe a little difficult. I think it's not that bad. It's kind of fun, but I'm more, I like these short ones just because it allows us to kind of talk about it. And then I want to go to the piece, this other piece that I sent out. Let's see.
Switch on the TV. What do you see?
The breaking news graphic, the scrolling text, the news presenter behind the desk. Read the signs, the hair, the makeup, the suit. What is this story about? The rhythm of the words, numbers, colors. Why are these codes here? The music, the size of the letters. How do you feel? A news bulletin is a selection of signs. The flow of words, read off the autocue. The artifice of the presenter's cadence. The news voice. The gaze looking right at you, but through a lens. Visual stand-ins for credibility, authority, legitimacy. Rhetorical motifs constructing the biggest myth of all, that what we are watching is unmediated reality. This is what Roland Barthes would have seen. The TV screen as a cultural text, and he would have unveiled its myths. Because to read symbols and signs, to interpret them, is the work of a semiotician. In the 1950s, Barthes started writing about popular culture. In his book Mythologies, he gathered multiple discordant subjects: food, horoscopes, religion, advertising, toys, photography, detergents. He saw this as elements of mass culture, imbued with ideology, providing society with the myths that once came from fables and epics. Barthes said, the starting point of these reflections was usually a feeling of impatience at the sight of the naturalness with which newspapers, art, and common sense constantly dress up a reality which is undoubtedly determined by history. Barthes didn't just spotlight the myths that surround us. He put back the curtain on their ideological premises. He warned us against taking all that surrounds us at face value. The fonts in your daily newspaper, they don't just reflect meaning, they add it, they change it. The framing of this shot, what's the history behind it? The selfie, the latest representation of the bourgeois individual. The stick, a seal of authenticity, of status. The subtitle, the voice as text. What could be more Barthesian?
So I'm curious, when it, as it was kind of exploring some of those aspects, what came up in your mind? What are kind of things that you see in kind of everyday life that maybe stand for something or are supposed to mean something? Like, what are things that kind of signify like intelligence, trustworthiness, patriotism?
That's a good question. That's hard to know. You see someone on TV or how do you know they're telling the truth? I mean, there's certain people I believe more than others. Like if it's on Fox News, I'm not going to believe it. I don't care how sincere they sound. But that's hard. Yeah, it's hard to know.
One of my, I guess my favorite example of this is when James Baldwin talks about watching cowboy movies. And there was a point when he realized watching the cowboy movie that in fact he was rooting for the main character or the protagonist, but that the representation of the like Indian, the enemy, like it was him. Like as a black man, like he was actually one of the enemies that like had they shared a form or a sign, right? And that like he said like I couldn't watch the movies the same way because I realized that I was the Indian. And so I think I wanted to think kind of like that, right? Which is like what are the sort of kind of things that tell us who's good and who's bad?
feel like
Go ahead, Angie.
I had a lot of this flipped, right now, a lot of this is like flipped upside down on the, I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force, and so like patriotism and the American flag was like, you know, a really huge part of my existence growing up. And so like I knew flag rules, like you don't hang a flag at night unless you have like a spotlight on it. You have to take it down every day. Like these things were really important. And so when Black Lives Matter became a thing and people, you know, there was big controversy on whether or not it was disrespectful to the flag. I remember watching people who, you know, were wearing the American flag on their clothes, which is another thing, like you're not supposed to wear it. That's another flag rule. You know, they pretended like they cared so much about, you know, the flag in America. In the same way, like, you know, they said that it was disrespectful to the flag to kneel when he had gone to veterans to try to find the most respectful way to do it. And then when they started to put the blue line in the flag for the Blue Lives Matter to counter that. It was just, the entire thing was such a, like, they were just messing it all up. And anyway, I really went through this period of time where like I would see the American flag on people's houses and it was like, oh, that, like, I know what side they're on. Like, I know that, you know, they are, and as my political ideas had shifted and I wasn't conservative anymore, like it really became like the American flag really started to mean like Trumpism for a while to me. My friend Shayna, she's here. She actually, she had a neighbor that was flying the Trump flag and the American flag, and like I think the Trump flag over the American flag or something like that. And I just had this feeling about the American flag nowadays. And she was like, no. Like we get to take that back. Like this is our country. This is our, you know. So Travis and I are talking about like on Inauguration Day when Trump is out of the office, like we're gonna like hang, you know, a flag on our house and just some way to like take it back. This, you know, because the flag used to mean something to me, but I can't even, and rightfully so, like knowing what people of color have gone through their whole lives, like celebrating the 4th of July is not like a thing that I can do anymore. This, you know, proud to be an American, like I didn't have the same America that a lot of people did. And so anyway, there's just a lot that it used to in my mind mean patriotism and America, and you know, and now I'm just like ooh, nope, not for me anymore. Like a lot of that has shifted for me, and specifically the flag is a thing that was like mine for a while and then not mine. I'm trying to take it back and, you know, like rework all of these things. And anyway, yeah, that's stuck out to me.
I just wanted to say, it's funny that you should mention that, because when Obama was elected, we put our flag up. We had our flag up for like 2 months straight every day. And I only had put it up on a couple of occasions before that, maybe on July 4th or something, or on September 11th. But when Obama was elected, that flag went up and it stayed up for a long time.
But it's in how these signals kind of change through time. I was thinking particularly about smoking, and when you see the movies of the 30s and 40s, when people are smoking, it's like the height of sophistication. You know, particularly when women smoke, it's like Betty Davis, you know, just in control of everything. But over time, when the information came out about smoking and more people quit, and they had these programs at school for kids, you know, to start them very early why smoking is bad. Now, when you see somebody smoke in a TV show, well, which is very rare, but in a movie, they're usually the bad guy. They don't have to say a word. All they have to do is have a cigarette in their hand, and that's it. And that has changed, what, in 50 years?
I was just going to point out, talking about the Westerns, I just went through an American history literature class, and we talked a lot about that cowboy and Indian, you know, dialogue, and how basically if you aren't a white, you know, Westerner, or like, you know, if you're not that cowboy role, you are the other. So it makes sense that people of color would identify with the Indian role and then group themselves as the villain. I think it's very sad how it's depicted in these Western plots, and just the way that the savior is always the cowboy.
Well, that comes from like that, all that manifest destiny stuff. Like they really believed that the cowboys were like, they are the ones that like cleared the land for us. You know, they were the heroes in the people that still follow that belief system, that like, you know, God intended for the white people to take over this land and make civilize the uncivilized. Like that whole mentality of that people still really cling to. They you know, it hasn't even occurred to them that this is like, they're still mad that we're trying to like change, you know, that a lot of people are trying to change, you know, Columbus Day to not honor him. Like there's still that whole whitewash history that people are still living in. Like, talk about two different realities in this country.
Great point, Angie.
I was smiling because I think in some ways, I think it's interesting, because to Mary's point, I don't actually think of smokers, when I see smokers in movies, as evil or the bad guy necessarily, but definitely that they are having some kind of moment or crisis or instability or some class indication. And then to Shayna's point, I think people, even folks of color who see these movies, they still, and sort of cowboy movies and whatever, that trope, still try to want to imagine themselves as the cowboy, as the hero. They want to, like, they still want to play that role. The question I think James Baldwin was kind of dealing with was like, yeah, whether that's possible for people of color, but particularly Black Americans, to be seen as the kind of the protagonist in that way, and not the other. Even though a lot of times the aspiration is to be the hero, and so and to that though, like as we start to imagine some of these tropes and some of these things, it's like, what does it mean to try to read to like, okay, we understand if we say, okay, there are, as our society changes, it's in constant change, we're in change, ideas are changing. At the same time, there are some very intentional elements around us in terms of whether that's like culture, whether that's people who hold power in terms of having the ability to message in certain kind of ways. So I'm thinking of corporations and advertisements. But if we could intentionally think about certain messages that are important to try to send out, what would they be? What would be the things to try to restore, reimagine in terms of our society? I shared, did anyone get to read Space Traders? So there's actually a YouTube video. I feel like I've shown a lot of YouTube today, but it was only like a total of 4 minutes. But there's this old publication. So I think I want to like kind of go from the middle of it. Derek Bell wrote this story called Space Traders that was basically aliens came and offered a deal to the US. And I think the year is like 2025. And basically was like, if you allow Black Americans to be sent away, or people with a certain amount of melanin, aka Black Americans, then we'll give you gold so your deficit is handled, and we'll give you technology so that you can have clean coal. And if you take this, you know, you can basically be in a new position. So the whole thing is a debate whether the country should send Black Americans to these aliens where they have no idea what would happen to them in this future time. So I want to, and the story kind of follows a politician who is a conservative. He's working for a conservative administration. He's Black, and he's trying to basically navigate the space of trying to basically save Black folks, and at the same time acquiesce to the concerns of white people. And so there's a place that they get to where he comes up with a strategy in terms of like, this might convince white people to save Black people, essentially. And I want to see what kind of things that you notice that the film is using to show some of the dynamics and messages of like what's happening. So I go to.
So you really think they're going to send us away, huh?
And I told you the one about the American dream?
No.
That's what all the niggas swimming back to Africa with a Jew under each arm.
You're outrageous. But you know, Piggy, we could fight back. Like the Palestinians. Rocks and guns.
Nigga, please. Like I'm gonna get myself killed just to stay here. I just hope they got them little bottles of Remy Martin on the flight. Got to have my Remy Martin.
Oh, Remy Martin.
Wait, hold it. Where you going?
I'll be right back.
Rich folks are crazy.
Listen, this is crazy. If the president didn't listen, why should they?
Because they're capitalists first, Caucasians second. What do you think I've been doing on these corporate boards all these years? This is what it's all been about.
The police and these people.
Black people have been calling me an Oreo ever since I was 12. After tomorrow, they'll call me a hero.
And if it doesn't work, what about the family? What about you?
Could we live with ourselves if I help them send Black people away?
No.
Call you tonight. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you for coming. Pleasure. Now, I suppose to the rank and file American, this unholy offer by the aliens must seem like an answer to their wildest dreams. It seems to me, however, upon further reflection, that this trade could bring our nation nothing but disaster.
He's right.
But I don't want you to take my word for it. Because after all, I come from a very obvious self-interest. Leland, why don't you tell the rest of the boys how this trade would affect your distilleries?
Blacks drink 33% of my hard liquor, 48% of my cognac alone. Who's going to take up that slack?
Why, it'll decimate athletic shoe sales.
Cool and Newport cigarettes.
Pork. 15% of our best consumers gone. Like that.
And we at the oil companies employ over 12 million people worldwide. Now, the alien, inexhaustible energy source will wipe us out overnight.
Furthermore, the blacks are all gone. How long do you think poor whites will stand being at the very bottom of the barrel? We'll have a revolution before the year's out.
We've got to tell those little green men to go back where they came from.
Excellent, gentlemen. Excellent. Now, I believe that this room represents a few $1 trillion in assets. I propose that we mount the largest ad campaign this nation has ever seen. We buy up every minute of radio and TV airtime, every print ad, every billboard, even every goddamn bus bench, and we flood them with the anti-trade message, SOS, save our soul.
We'll have whites on their knees begging blacks to stay.
By executive order, the president has banned African Americans from leaving the country before tomorrow's referendum.
Mommy,
This
we can't just pretend this isn't happening.
News Now.
You know, Sis Ruth, my great-grandmother, she used to clean white folks' houses on the main line in Philadelphia.
In other news,
She told me,
Mexican.
you know, they may not like us, but they sure can't live without us. Don't worry, baby. They can't live without us.
Oh, Mommy,
Has been flooded.
why do Marlins clean their houses now?
Actor George Hamilton vowed today he too will go.
Cigarettes! Cognac! Cigarettes! Cognac! Did you know that the African Americans won over 500 of the 850 Olympic medals awarded to the United States?
Yes. Good thing.
Cigarettes! Cognac! Cigarettes! Cognac!
If you couldn't see that, it's a very dated reference because the Washington football team is no longer called the Redskins. But it said, you can't have the Redskins without black skins.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you. My name's Casey Kasem, and welcome to Alien Trade Referendum. Just say no! Oh, boy. Can you imagine life without jazz? No. Or without the blues? No. Or without rock and roll? No. Well, that's what life would have been like in these United States without the contributions of African Americans. If this referendum passes, and we vote to send dark-skinned people up into outer space, I'll tell you one thing, you can forget about ever seeing another dream team again.
You know, we didn't bring any scientists or anything. People yourself. Just entertainers. Yeah. Okay.
This is for people.
This is for people.
Eggheads.
So tomorrow, when you pick up your phone to vote in the privacy of your own home, just think.
Privacy.
My people, oh, my people, the sit-ins and the boycotts have worked. We are ahead in the polls.
Don't count your chickens before they come home to roost.
Oh, somebody bring me some milk, because here come a big Oreo.
Yes, yes. Give him a chance. We are ahead in the polls. But who knows how these people will vote in the privacy of their own homes.
Oh, sit down, Tom.
I am well aware of how I am perceived, but now is not the time for our petty squabbling. Now, this came to me this morning. In order to ensure victory, we must stop resisting the offer and urge the country to accept the traitors' proposition. The major motivation for racism in this country is the deeply held belief that black people should not have anything that white people don't. Not only do whites insist on better jobs, higher incomes, better neighborhoods, better schools, but they leap to gobble up our language, our dress, our music, and our dance. Therefore, I propose that from now until the polls open this evening, we circulate the rumor that the aliens have arranged for our transport to the wealthiest and most beautiful utopia in the known universe. White folks will go ape, wondering what we will encounter in this new land. They will gnash their teeth. They will even argue that to limit the space traders' offer to blacks is an unconstitutional discrimination against whites.
I cannot stand here any longer and be influenced by a man who has dedicated his entire life to sabotaging his own people. Now is not the time for trickery and tomfoolery. My people were brought here involuntarily, and involuntarily is the only way they're gonna take me out. Yes,
Without power must use cunning and guile.
Well, today is the day of reckoning for 20 million Americans of African descent. Voting will begin in just a few seconds from now. As you know, 2 telephone numbers will appear on your screen, one in favor and one against the space traders' offer. After dialing the number of your choice, simply key in your personal security code. Here, ladies and gentlemen, are the 2 numbers. The polls will remain open for the next 3 hours, but we should be able to project a decision very shortly. Wait. Ladies and gentlemen, with just 6% of the vote tallied, we project that the referendum will pass by a comfortable margin. Oh, God. What? Collection centers will be set up tomorrow morning by the National Guard. The aliens say that they will allow only 1 piece of carry-on luggage per person. Oh, me. This is Bernard Shields. Goodbye.
down. Dad. Come on, this is insane. You're just sitting here like nothing's wrong, nothing's going on. We gotta do something. I mean, can we get across the border or get guns for everybody? I don't know.
Jennifer, they stopped selling guns to us yesterday, and 2 days ago they quadrupled the border guards. You know that.
Well, you and he did pledge the same fraternity. He just can't.
Morning, Gail. Wife, you aren't a sight for sore eyes. Linda sends her regards.
England?
Promise is a promise.
Here.
Not you, Gail. Promise is a promise. You knew it was hopeless as soon as the idea was out of the bag. Didn't you?
All right, people off the bus and on the beat. Come on, folks, let's move. Get your belongings. Get off the bus. Stand line. You heard him. Right to the right. Get it ready. You heard him. Your family, stay together. Let's go. Let's go. Off the bus and on the beat. Now, follow along. If you can't carry it, leave it behind. Push wild, no talking. Go,
as we say goodbye to our dark friends and neighbors, we say hello to a new era of American peace and prosperity. For World News Now, I'm Stryker O'Rourke.
Every bargain ain't a bargain. America kind of let the brothers and sisters down.
So, what did y'all think of that?
I just came in from another meeting and I don't know what the heck I was watching. So, interesting thing to come in on.
I thought it was a pretty accurate breakdown of like a lot of the views that this country has.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think being seen as solely consumers or people to benefit from if even seen as people at all. I think that's a pretty true depiction in that.
It was a Lost in Space show?
Maybe not.
So one of the aspects that I've been interested in thinking about in terms of like, well, what would be important for us as humanists to sort of keep in mind or sort of imagine as we try to live out in certain ways and build communities in certain ways. And Afrofuturism is this genre of like engaging or looking at the world through in sort of the future. And one of the aspects of it that's sort of like in terms of it, the people that sort of engage in it is the subversiveness of imagining people in the future that are Black, because in science fiction, one of the, or fantasy, one of the criticisms is that you don't see Black people in a lot of very present in a lot of depictions of the future. And that in itself is an indication of not just what we imagine our future, but maybe what we also think of our present and what we value and what we have space for and what fits into our social imagination. And so that Afrofuturists are very intentional about placing Black people in the future. This is a very early text. This is kind of almost preempts things that folks have that sort of attribute to Afrofuturism. But I think it does something that, you know, it tries to, through a kind of storytelling, a kind of mythology, point to things that are not so often said out loud or weren't so often said out loud at that time, in terms of like how, if we were to imagine the future and this question were to come up, what choices do we think we would make based on what we have now? What choices would, if that sort of agreement was offered, what would this country decide to do, right? And this author, the person who drew up this text, was like, oh, I think this would go this way, right? And what does it say about us? What does it say about the country or the country that they're interacting with? And then what does it look like to start beginning to create new myths and new narratives, and so that we can start to imagine a different kind of path?
I think there was a line that he said when he was speaking in the church, and then he, at the very end, he yelled, people without power need to be cunning, and something else he said. And like, I thought about how true that is, and the reason that, one of the reasons that it is so true is that people with power are already so cunning, like they're already like manipulating so much of everything. And so the idea of like playing by the rules always, like thinking that that's going to get us somewhere, when they made the rules, they created the rules, they made this system work to advantage them and continue to have, like, you know, white men have power. And so the idea of trying to work in that system is not, it hasn't worked. I mean, it has worked slowly, but not like effectively, not in time, you know, like Trump happened, like there's a lot, you know. So I feel like that line was, made a lot of sense to me, like the more that I realized just how, like, it's already happening, like the power is already, they already break all the rules. And anyway, I'm talking a lot, sorry.
I was thinking that, things don't have to be that way. Maybe a lot of people do feel they should be that way, but they don't have to be. I was thinking, I just read today that Jeff Bezos, who of course owns Amazon and the Washington Post and everything under the sun, is the world's richest man. He divorced his wife, and they had a big settlement, financial settlement, split, and she got a large part of his assets, and she's contributing $4 billion to charity. Now, I never heard of Jeff Bezos contributing 1 cent to charity. So, it doesn't have to be that way. You can have his ex-wife has a different type of mentality. People don't have to do it a certain way just because other people have acted that way. We're free to make our own decisions.
I almost wonder like how often people have acted that way though, like in terms of trying to, and I feel like the only times in history that we've seen things progress has been when people have acted outside of the rules, outside of traditional roles, outside of like what we were told we were allowed to do. And so it feels like, I understand, as far as like the cheating, not wanting to like stoop to that level of like immorality in terms of like becoming Mitch McConnell, but like at what point do we understand that like, no, we need to do things like stack the bench in our favor because they're going to continue to stack the bench in their favor. Like, no, it's not like altruistic because we are trying to tip the balance of power, blah, blah, blah. Like, I've heard conservatives argue the altruism of that. But like, if we tried to change the actual system to work for us the way that they're doing it, like, if we started to think like that, I feel like that we I don't know, I keep battling this. I go back and forth with it, and yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Angie, that's like kind of, does the end justify the means type of question, if I understood what you were battling. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of, except for I just automatically, I believe that the end does justify the means, because the end of a stacked Supreme Court, now thankfully they've made some decisions that surprised me recently, but like I imagined them, when Amy got on, I imagined that we were going to have, really marginalized people lose their rights, and it's already, like we can't go backwards. So it felt like for sure the ends justified the means to stack the court the other way. They already did it. They already messed it up. And when you actually look at the history of what they've done on the court and how they've planned it and how it has swung, it hasn't been, of course that is an opinion and somebody could probably argue the other side. Anyway, when I look at the way that they've done it, to me, the end does justify the means of that. And it's not even like it's that privilege component of it, like people that decided not to vote for Biden because he was not what we actually needed, but he was better than Trump, and people thought like, well, I'm not going to vote then because I didn't want to vote for Biden. And that was like, yeah, but we need to get Trump out of the office. Like that was the more important thing. And so, we voted for somebody that wasn't the best. So yeah, I feel like we should stack the court the other way because they're already the whole system was already working against us from the beginning. So we need to switch it up. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Christian, I think your question was something about narratives we tell ourselves, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, like what are ways we could start rethinking, like basically intentionally crafting certain kind of narratives that that get at what we think is important. Like, how do we start seeding thoughts, seeding things? What would we think? What do we think is important to start talking about, essentially? Or like kind of meaning that we should be wanting to incorporate more.
Well, I could say something to that. I was struck by the movie's demonstration of how selfish people could be, especially when they are looking at self-preservation. And so I think they miss the bigger picture in that everyone was important. And as if you give in and put a certain people, step on top of them to get ahead, then it's going to be your downfall. You're not always going to have people then to do. I mean, it's just a downfall for everyone. You need to realize that as a group that we're stronger together than we are divided. So that was.
How do you start saying that? How do you tell? What's the story that you tell that says that?
It's hard. It is hard because so many people are struggling that they can't see beyond that to see the bigger picture. And maybe they don't see other options. So maybe it's finding the other options that kind of equal the playing field.
I think a lot of it's generational. I do think younger people are more open to seeing the bigger picture than older folks like in my generation. Although I feel that the people in the ethical society, Biden voters, see it. Unfortunately, the statistics show that Trump got an ungodly percentage of white voters, something like 55 or 60%, 60% of white voters. And I find that really disgusting. Especially the white men were the worst too. And it's like, gee, think of all the people that I grew up with, and a lot of them are dedicated hardcore Trumpies. It just makes me feel very, very depressed. But thankfully, the younger people tend to be more liberal and see the bigger picture much better, I think.
I think that's a really good point of it really does start with education of youth. The fact that we are starting to get rid of, because Trump tried to write some education where we had to stop teaching. I grew up being taught that Christopher Columbus was a hero, and a lot of us were, and we started to give kids real education on that, and then Trump wanted to reverse all of that. So I do think the idea of having education, that is a good base, but I still, the things what we should talk about to kind of get us closer to that idea, I feel like one of the, I'm on a soapbox here, but I do feel like one of the things that we need to talk about more is how these systems, why they were set up the way that they were, what the founding fathers' goals were, the compromises that were made that, that made things set up this way. Because I think that the more that we talk to people about that idea, the more that we can get people to understand that it's really okay to mess with some of these systems. Like, they're not as sacred as like this country has them, like has us believe. Anyway, that's, I think.
It's not as sacred. I like that. But I also think, I also want to say, like, well, what if you got into a machine in 50 years in the future, and this is like all ethical society members or people who are attached, and you were conversing with people that were the descendants of people that you cared about, and they said you were wrong on X, Y, and Z. Right? Even as ethical society members, even as Biden voters, what would be the way? Like, and I'll say it in a way, like, you can't really conceive or understand what they say you're wrong at, or what you were wrong with. But what do you build to, or sort of try to establish a kind of community with certain kind of values that tries to incorporate the possibility that you're wrong? What does that look like?
No one, hardly anyone's going to respond well to being told they're wrong. I think you need to build on, now we see a better way. This is how we progress and improve our ways. This is, how we grow. We've been here, but now we can see that there is a better way to do things, and we can begin to incorporate some improvements, and there's always room for improvement. I think most people will agree that, rather than being told they're wrong.
I think that brings up a really interesting point about the idea of, just doing the best with what you know. And it kind of strikes empathy from me to those who might have contributed to the system that is very imperfect now.
Well, I don't think that it's probably the most diplomatic thing to say you're wrong. And actually, I think that's wrong, because you don't get somewhere 50 years in the future like that. It builds slowly but surely, step by step. So if you say to the guys who built step one, hey, you guys were wrong. No, they weren't. They did what they could in the time they had. And other people built on until you're 50 years in the future. Yeah, it's kind of hard to give up. Well, we were the pioneers and we did this and that and the other thing. And I think that should be recognized. But also then, because of you, look how far we got with other things. And I think that's the approach, not, boy, did you guys stink. That's never going to work. It's going to create animosity.
Well, I tell you this, though, I think Mary Ellen has a good point, but there's also the issue of do you really want to get into a conversation with somebody whose beliefs are diametrically opposed to yours? Is it worth it? Personally, I don't try to convince anyone on the right-wing side of the spectrum that my ideas are correct and theirs are wrong. I don't even try. I don't want to. It's not worth it to me. I just don't I don't talk to them. I might talk to them about other subjects, or what's on TV, or what song do you like or something, but I stay off the topics that I know we disagree on, because I just don't feel like wasting my time. I know it's like you're in a different dimension. So what's the point?
So I tried to set up that example by highlighting there were people that were related to people that you agree with now. So they're descendants of people that you agree with now. So it's not so much that you're not even on the same, you're not in the same arena of thought, is that you were in an arena with thought with these people, who they ended up coming from. But where this person ended up, they are looking back and saying, with you, and saying, hey, you're on the wrong side of this X, Y, and Z.
So it's probably important if I was going to try to build a community that I could foresee this happening, you know, then I myself right now should probably not judge my ancestors so harshly. You know, they were idiots, they were jerks, look at how they treated these people. Maybe I should be a little bit more open-minded. What did they know? What did they have? What could they do? I don't know.
Oh, what about the other side? What if your ancestors are on the wrong side because they refused to do something? They had access.
Like
Go ahead, Angie.
No, you answer.
Well, I mean, I think I tend to judge harshly, but I was trying to think how, if I was the person 50 years from now being told, like, you really messed up, like that was the wrong way to go, you know, how would I want to be treated, I guess. Good class right now.
Are those little people? Are those big? Are those? It's a little person. They can come.
He's 12. He's on the edge of.
Yeah, he's on the edge of like almost a normal sized person. You're gonna. I'm really talking about you, bud. You're gonna tell someone in 20 years they were wrong. Hint, hint. And I'm just trying to prepare you for the conversation.
I don't think it'll take him 20 years.
He's already saying it.
Knowing that one.
I wonder where the line is on, because I don't agree that it's not right to tell someone that they're wrong. I think there's maybe like best practice, and maybe, I don't know, because right now, the issues that I am like, that in my immediate family that I'm dealing with are like LGBTQ rights, and there is such hatred coming from some of my family members, and like the way that they speak. So like, for my family member wrote a post one time talking about, like, if I ever saw feminine hygiene products in a men's bathroom, I would, you know, rip them all down and throw them away. And I spoke to this person in, you know, it was a family member. I think there's different tones for different audiences. And so like, if I'm talking to a troll online, I'm going to have one tone, but this was a family member. And so like, my tone wasn't as aggressive, but there was a, like, this is wrong. And I tried to bring it to, you know, like, because he believes in God and God created all the things. And so I brought it to, you know, there are humans that possess both male and female organs. There are men that have needs for feminine products. And anyway, so I feel like the idea of like not telling people that they're wrong isn't, like, that's not a hard and fast rule, because at what point because we told the Nazis they were wrong in very aggressive ways to Germany, right? And so like, if there were, like, we talk about it now as Nazis are becoming like a thing, like you can just say in this country, even though we fought a war against it, like, at what point can we say, shut up, sit down, go back in your hole? Like, when can we say that's wrong? Like, there are times where we can, and I know that we're trying to inch towards best practice, but I'm just not quite convinced that that's best practice when some of these issues are so like that, you know, you can't be polite about some of this stuff. Like, some of it's life and death, some of it's just kindness. I don't know. Yeah. I never know how to finish a thought. I just say the thought and then I'm like, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I think that's a good point that Angie's making, though. When do you raise your voice? If you're at a table, a dinner table with relatives, and someone starts giving you the N word and all that stuff, I mean, what do you do? What do you do? Do you stand up and say, point your finger at them and say, shut up, I'm not going to listen to that? Do you just sit there and say nothing? Do you walk out of the room? What do you do?
And I feel like that's like, that depends on how many times you've engaged in the like how much attempt, like that has been a thing for me of like, at what point do you decide no more effort? Like I have, like, at what point do we ostracize the people that are like, nah, I'm going to be a Nazi? At what point do we be like, okay, then you can go away. Like, we don't want you here. We're, like, at what point do we, I think that is like, do you guys believe, because this is what I don't know. Like, I had this thought for a while, like all humans are so, like, we are all like capable of good. And I believe that that's true. But then at some point, like, humans stop trying. Some humans stop trying. Like, do we believe that Trump is redeemable? Like, is that a possibility in somebody's mind? I don't think so. So at what point can we just be done with him and stop trying to be nice? And like, at what point, society as a whole, can we decide that?
Yeah, for the way I talk about that, I say like, respecting someone's inherent worth is different than feeling like you can form a relationship with them. It's like, I can give everyone inherent worth. I can respect their right to life, right? And still not agree with what they do and how they act in the world. I can even hold them accountable. There's a really beautiful film. It's called Elsa. If you have Canopy, or if you have, it's also on this thing called Quelle TV. But this movie where this young woman is dealing with trying to come to terms with her father. And her father is not a nice person. But she nevertheless wants a relationship with him. But she makes a lot of other choices that are like, wouldn't be advantageous to her father. So the movie sort of tracks her journey through that. And to me, it told me like, what does love mean? Because I love you, or I love humans in general, doesn't mean that I also have to accept the worst of you. And so, I take this in this conversation to take it broader of like, I guess, because I think about my own journey around pronouns and being able to hold space for trans folks, and the way that's continuous, like that's never going to end. And then when I think about it more deeply, that also extends to other Black people, that extends to Black women, that I am constantly figuring out what are the ways that internalized oppression influences the way I treat people that look like me. What are the ways that my understanding of gender or my gender privilege affect the way that I treat people who are not cisgender? And I'm never gonna be right. I'm never gonna be in a space where I'm always right. But the openness to being on a journey of figuring out what does that look like based on what I have, what opportunity, what events happen, what kind of choices I can make. right? Because then at a certain point, it's like all we have are choices. And once we realize that that's continuous and never stops, right? It makes us say, I think it should make us ask the question, are we making the best choice at this time? And so even if it's like, the question of what do we do with people who are Nazis or are sympathetic to fascist views, are open to it. Someone may look and say, hey, like everybody played a role in fostering an environment where people were more staunch in their corners. And that environment, that's fission in social structure is what facilitates the place of fascist elements. So someone could say, well, you didn't work hard enough to build a community of trust and relationships built on trust and reestablishing trust, right? You were more focused on trying to appear right. That's a possibility. It's like, how do we hold space for the possibility that someone might say that to us? How does that affect how we engage with other people? How does that affect how we build community? How does that affect over and over of thinking of that over and over? So that's kind of what I was trying to get at today. Does that make sense?
Christian, what you just said, it made sense to me for sure. Thank you. It reminded me of a few years ago, and I don't remember what year, time runs together, but at ESMR, we had, what did we do? We had someone from Monsanto come and speak about about glyphosate, Roundup in general, and just kind of the company. And it really made some members uncomfortable. Like, why would we do that? You know, because they're the devil. But we had also had like an organic local farm speak as well. We were trying to have both sides, you know, and it's kind of the same struggle, you know, where if you're on the path where you want to make sure you're open and you're up to date and learning information, and then sometimes you have to converse with the devil. I don't know, but it didn't work out very well, because, you know, I had thought that maybe we would be more interactive with the Monsanto rep. It was very uncomfortable. They actually sent some people, like, I don't know,
like bodyguards.
They were like it was like security to our little bitty place in St. Peter's, and it didn't work well.
Yeah. But I think that whole part of the experience is probably part of that, like that learning that happened.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, like this is dealing with a corporate entity, dealing with a corporate message, dealing with, like, we were part of that. We were drawn into it. I had a similar but different experience a few years ago in the Philadelphia Ethical Society, where someone was talking about GMOs generally, how we talk about genetically modified food, what it means to have natural food, and like, is there an actual health difference? And his thing was like, you know, we as Americans will say, some Americans will say, oh, I went to Europe and the food was so much better. And he was like, really what probably happened was you were in Europe, so you felt like the food was better. Like, and it was kind of just, and this other thing of like, you know, kind of, where is the point where our values or ideas are backed up by actual facts, and when is it kind of like we have this bias because, oh, like we want to, like we feel like it's better to have natural foods because that kind of branding, that language that appeals to us. But what does that really mean, and does that actually have an impact on our, like, the food health? Now, and then I take a bigger picture. It's like, well, our diet, and especially of, like, you know, when you talk about income differentials and like socioeconomic, the way that folks eat and what they're able to eat, what's marketed to them, what's available in their neighborhoods, that impacts the food that people think of as American or their food, right? And if you're in another country where there's more socioeconomic, there's less income differential, and people are able to afford better, healthier food, right? So that's also part of it, right? We like our food choices are not always necessarily made by us if we have the capability to make them, based on whether we have the capability to make them, right? Other things determine that. So it's like I have to code all those things and still figure out, well, what's the right thing or the most right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But members were very upset during that.
A few of them were, and it was okay. I mean, it was understandable what they were saying, you know.
Yeah.
Was I there when they talked about that?
I don't know.
You said, so what'd you say?
I said, was I there when they talked about that?
Oh no, this is in Philadelphia. It's just folks felt very folks didn't like the tone of the speaker. It wasn't like bodyguards, but he was dismissive of the like natural food element.
I see.
Like non-GMO stuff, and was like, that's just a knee-jerk reaction to the title GMO, because genetically modified can mean a whole spectrum of things, like you know, food that's like intentionally grown a certain kind of way so that it has certain genes, versus like gene splicing in a kind of like, you know, scientific process. They're all scientific, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So Jill's out. Is there any last thoughts, any questions? This is our last of this series of process philosophy, existentialism, and pragmatism. Well, over the course of these, when you think about like, okay, these are things that like humanism has assumed as like, these are big schools of thought, but then like ethical culture, the thing that we're practicing or trying to learn about or trying to be engaged with. Does there seem to be a correlation? Does it not make sense? Is it, what are some thoughts, or what are some things that people are like taking away? Go ahead, Angie. I see you up mute. Go ahead.
I don't think that you have answered my question. I like when things are wrapped up with nice, neat bows. And
okay, go ahead.
No, I just mean there's no way to answer it. I'm being funny. The idea of us not like fostering communities of trust and, you know, being a part of like the division that makes people kind of cling to their fascist views is a little punch to the gut, a little, because I believe that. I saw myself do that in Trump's first election, we had the second one, he lost it. Okay, sorry. And when I found out like the Russian plot was like they used both sides to like really inflame both sides, and how I was like, oh gosh, like I was a freaking chess piece by the Russians completely, like, and so I was trying to tone things down from there. But then I kind of had this like resurgence of like this, like actually there doesn't have to, anyway, I'm really struggling through the idea of like, where's the balance between we need to try to unite, but we also need to make a firm stand against like these things that like are really happening right in front of our eyes. And so I always think about now of like when I'm speaking to people online, and if I get to that more aggressive place where I am matching a troll's energy, I always think about like the purpose then isn't that I'm trying to reach that person, but I'm trying to state the counterpoint to that person for other people to read. And so I don't know, I like it when things are more black and white. This just feels so gray to me, and I haven't figured it out. But like I've been struggling through these questions for a few years now, and so I am very appreciative of this space to continue to figure it out. I guess where I'm landing is that like there isn't a black and white. I see the good for both sides, and I see a reason to use the strategy in each strategy in different scenarios. Like there are some scenarios where there's going to be more need for being firm, and then there's some scenarios where like bringing unity is the purpose. I don't know. That's where I'm at right now on it all. But this has been amazing, and thank you for everything that you've provided for my brain to